Joined as we are every Friday by the senior producer from NFL Films, also co-host of ESPN's NFL Matchup show. It is the one and only Greg Cosell. Greg, how we doing here on a Friday?
We're doing great, guys. I stayed in my suit today because I'm wearing a new suit, and I just kind of liked it, so I figured I'd leave it on for you guys.
You look like $1
Very
million.
nice.
You look like a 1950s head coach on the sidelines. Good.
Well,
for
there
you.
you go. Exactly. Yeah. Well, I guess Steve, all I need is that cigarette, right? You know.
That's right.
Those 1950s
Or a
coaches.
fedora.
Yeah, a fedora and a
That's right. A fedora and a cigarette, and I'd be good to go.
You are the party. Perfect. Yeah.
Greg Cosell's weekly segment is presented by Scott Lawnyard, an official commercial site work partner of the Buffalo Bills. And let's begin here. I know we touched on some of this last week, Greg, with respect to, the Jets and the matchup here the second time around. I don't know if you saw this. Reggie Gilliam is out for this game.
I saw that. Yeah.
The Bills played about 10 plays of 21 personnel the first time around. We're anticipating if it has to be somebody, if Coach Dorsey wants to still use 21 personnel with a quote-unquote fullback in there, that it would probably be Quinton Morris that would take the role. But as you mentioned last Friday when you were on with us, we are just as intrigued with the use of the pony package last week against New England. And I think it's a good look to use against this Jets defense. What do you think?
Yes. And in fact, you could go back to the first matchup when they did use the pony package and Cookwin ran a wheel route in the high red zone, and he got on top of safety Whitehead. And that was the play in which Rankins had a sack and a forced fumble. I don't know if you remember that specific play. But this past game against New England, they had 13 snaps with the pony package. 12 of them had Cook and Hines. Now, they were running plays for the most part, but they've had 10 days now, and they could certainly expand and enhance that package as they go forward, because that's something that the Jets have not quite seen a whole lot of. No one really has, except for, they used it this past week, but the Jets didn't see much of it week 9. So I wouldn't be surprised, Brownie, if you saw more of that. Obviously, Hines now being here with extra time for practice. Both Cook and Hines are really good receivers. You could well see that.
Why would that be a good matchup?
Well, number one, Steve, I think then the Jets would have to decide how they want to defend that from a personnel standpoint. Because if you're playing with two backs, let's say you're playing two backs and three wide, I think they'd go nickel. If you're playing two backs and one tight end with Knox, do they go nickel? Do they go big nickel, which they've played snaps of using Parks as the third safety? Do they stay base and keep Quan Alexander on the field as a third linebacker? That becomes the first question. And then the second question becomes, how do they match up to it? Are they playing it zone? Are they playing it man? Who matches up to whom? These are all questions that they'll know the answer to, the Jets, obviously before the game. None of this will be done on a whim, but it's just something they then have to prepare for in practice.
The last few weeks, the Bills' defense has faced quarterbacks that, for the most part, stay in the pocket, not second reaction throwers, as you like to say. Would Mike White fall into that category as well? Because it seems like when a play gets off script, it's more often than not he doesn't make something great happen.
No, I would say, Brownie, that Mike White's not a statue, but he's not a second reaction player. Yeah. And I think what has shown up in his two starts is the fact that the ball comes out. He doesn't get stuck in the pocket. He seems to have a relatively refined sense of timing, which is probably the way he was brought up in the game as a quarterback, because he's not an exceptional athlete. I thought in the two starts, and I know he played last year against Buffalo and it didn't go well, but that's a year ago, so who knows. But in his two starts, he knew where to go with the ball based on the route concept versus the coverage, and the ball pretty consistently came out within the structure of the play concept. That's the kind of quarterback he is, and I think that's the kind of quarterback he has to be an effective player.
Give us an idea about his weapons. Who's his favorite guy? I mean, Garrett Wilson has really emerged over the last few weeks.
Yeah, Garrett Wilson's a really good receiver, Steve. I thought he was, I'm bad with lists, but if I had to make a list of the receivers coming out of this previous draft, I would have said from a pure talent standpoint, I had George Pickens number 1. Wilson may well have been my number 2. I really like Garrett Wilson's game. I think you can line him up anywhere. You could line him up at X. You could line him up as a Z, as the movement receiver, which they do. He's a really, really good route runner. He has a great feel for understanding how to get corners turned, how to get them off their spot, and he's really good run after catch. I think he's a really good receiver, and on his way to being one of the better ones in the league.
Okay, one problem, though, that the Jets have had is converting on third down. They've been over 40% conversion rate just once in the last 7 weeks, and that was against the Bears, the worst third down defense in football, and even then they were only 7 of 12.
Right.
What is the main sticking point for them on third down from what you've seen? Is it not getting in favorable down and distance? Is it a pure execution issue? Is it pass protection? What is there an overriding factor there that you've seen?
I think, Brownie, you've got to just now look at the Mike White situation because, Zach Wilson was really, really bad.
Yeah.
And I mean, I say that honestly as a film study statement, not as trying to be personal. Zach Wilson is at the point, unfortunately, where he's broken and you need to start from scratch. But that's not relevant for this game. So I think you have to look at Mike White. I don't know his numbers offhand. You may know just the last 2 games offhand.
Yeah. So
my guess is, go ahead.
They went 7 of 12 against the Bears, the worst third down defense in football.
Yeah.
And then last week they went 3 for 16 on third down.
Yeah, they were bad last week on third down. And, when I watched the tape, I didn't necessarily come away saying, here's the reason why. I thought that early in the game, they really struggled. I thought their pass game early was tough. And then I thought that late in the first half, you may remember this play because I know you looked at it. White hit Wilson late in the first half, 18 yards on an out cut. I don't know if you remember that play. It was really a big time throw. And I thought he then got comfortable in the game and he started to make a lot of good throws in the second half. So I don't want to use the one game last week as a reason why they can't convert on third down. Obviously, you have to convert on third down. And last week's game was kind of odd because they sort of got behind pretty big and then they did come back and they literally had to throw the ball a ton in the second half. One area, one thing they have featured on, they featured Brownie in White's 2 starts is play action. There have been a lot of play action dropbacks, and White's been really, really good. Okay, he's 18 for 26 for 329 and a touchdown on off play action, and 14 of those 18 completions have resulted in first downs. So I think that's something you really have to be aware of because they do it a lot. And they've done it well with Mike White at quarterback.
Well, certainly the Minnesota game last week was a little bit of an aberration because it seems to me the Jets would love to run the football more than they did against Minnesota. But they got, Michael Carter, James Robinson, Ty Johnson. But Zonovan Bam Knight seems to be a newfound toy that they're kind of enamored with. Give us a little insight as how important is their run game in comparison to other teams around the league, and how are they doing in it?
Well, I agree with you, Steve. I think they would want to run the ball more. Last week, they got into a game where they were behind, and I think they felt like they had to throw. So I don't think they want to play that way. Now, Knight, I watched him. He's a rookie from North Carolina State. I didn't think he was a higher level running prospect. He's one of those guys he's got good size. There's a physical feel to him. I wouldn't say he's shifty and elusive. I would say that he's much more of a strong runner with contact balance. You do need to get bodies to him to bring him to the ground. So he's not bursty. He's kind of a one-speed guy. He's kind of methodical. So I guess the way this game plays out will dictate how much they run the football. If the game's close, I would think that they would want to stay with the run game to some extent. If the Bills can get ahead and they abandon the run game, then I think obviously Knight or any other back would not really be a big factor in the game.
And to this point, we have not seen the corners for the Jets travel at all. They really like Reed and they like Sauce where they are, and he's not afraid to play man coverage and leave those guys on islands. has that pretty much been consistent throughout the season, or have they played, significantly more zone in any one week?
I think they play pretty much a number of things. I don't think they're a high percentage one or the other. I think they play a lot of different coverages, and I think that they're pretty comfortable playing that. I think they're more zone than man overall. That's pretty much the way Saleh is. I would say that when you just look at it overall, they would be a reasonably higher percentage zone coverage defense, Brownie, than a man coverage defense. Everybody plays man situationally, but this is more of a zone-based defense. I would say their defensive profile against pass would be 4-man D-line pass rush, zone coverage, not a high percentage blitz team. They didn't blitz much in the Week 9 meeting. And you're 100% right about Gardner and Reed. Gardner plays left corner, Reed plays right corner. I remember before the last game listening to other people and saying to myself, I guess these people don't watch the games, saying, I can't wait for the Gardner-Diggs matchup. And you know what? Gardner ended up lining up over Stephon Diggs twice, and both times it was because Diggs went in motion. So he's not going to travel with Stephon Diggs.
What were the Jets able to do in the last matchup that stifled the Bills' offense?
I thought their pass rush was a big factor in the game. I thought that they got Josh playing a little fast at times. He wasn't as patient in the pocket as we've seen. Their pass game got a little out of sync. And Allen was out of sync. So, I think that was kind of the first game where they really started to get Cook involved, and that's clearly continued. So I think we'll see how that plays out. But I think for the most part that the Bills' pass game was not really what we come to expect it to be. And I think, we'll see if that's the case this week. As I said, the Jets relied almost exclusively on a 4-man D-line pass rush. They didn't blitz much at all. The Bills only gained just over 300 yards in that game. It was an odd game because they were effective on third down if you look at the numbers, but Allen was not good on third down. So it was an odd game in terms of how they converted their third downs.
And then just circling back to the pony package that we started with, as much as they might want to run out of that like they did last week, I think there's some passing options that can be had here in the underneath areas, against that second line of defense for the Jets. I mean, we saw it last week. Josh did not hesitate to go to the backs. I mean, Cook had 6 catches for 40-something yards, and there were times where I'm saying to myself, that didn't look like a check down. I'm wondering if Cook was like the first guy in the read on a couple of them because he went to him so quickly. I mean, it's probably not the case, but I guess the point I'm driving at here is I think that's a good way, knowing it's tough for the Bills, or at least it has been for most of the year, to run traditional screens with backs effectively. I'm wondering if, using them out of the backfield on quick release, passing routes can kind of alleviate some of the pressure that the Jets can generate.
Well, here's what we don't know, Brownie. Those plays, what we don't know is this. When a team plays zone, and let's say Allen takes the snap and drops back, and then the underneath coverage retreats immediately to a pretty decent depth, we don't know if Josh is told, hey, just throw the short, quick throw to the back. That looks like a check down, but if you're going to get 8, 9, 10, 11 yards, there's nothing wrong with that, particularly if it's first down or if it's 2nd and 6. And you know what? Maybe we start to pull those linebackers up a little bit. And for a team that plays predominantly zone, what then happens, and Steve, you know this, then you create that void between the underneath coverage and the deep coverage, because the Jets do play a lot of split safety, so you start to get that void. So that's the one thing we don't know, what Ken Dorsey and staff are telling Josh. They could well be telling him, hey, if you see those linebackers getting out of there, you know what? Throw it to Cook. Throw it to Singletary. We'll take the 9, 10, 11-yard gain every single time, and it may pay off as the game progresses.
Right. I'm going to flip it around and ask you a little bit about the Bills' defense. Tre'Davious White's snap count is starting to climb as he gets more acclimated. How do you think that changes the back end of the Bills' defense?
Well, I think it changes it significantly, assuming he's Tre'Davious White, because he's a really good corner, and so he's better than the corners that um, they would be playing with otherwise. So, I think that helps a lot, and I think in this game that would be really important because the Jets do have pretty good receivers. Moore's been playing well. Mims has been getting some good snaps. So I think that, if White's can play 40, 50, whatever the number of snaps, then that's obviously a really good thing. He's a really good player. I forget the number of snaps he played last week. I know the first game he only played 16 snaps, but I think he played meaningfully more last week.
Yeah, it was over 30, I know for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then on the other side, we've seen Xavier Rhodes, the veteran pickup, get a lot more time. He certainly got a lot last week. The Bills like long corners, and he is that. I know he's a 10-year veteran. But you mentioned Mims, and that's a big target. A guy like Rhodes is not a bad matchup for a tall player like that.
No, and again, the Bills, like for instance, last week the Bills played predominantly zone, and they played both single high and split safety. Rhodes, I think at this point in his career is a really good zone corner.
Yeah.
I think he understands how to play zone. He's been in the league a long time. I think Tre'Davious White can do anything. I thought the Bills actually showed some nice combination coverages as well on third down, where it had zone principles and man principles. I think you'll see more of that because at the end of the day, I know White's not a rookie, but he's not started a lot of games in this league, and his whole game is built on getting the ball out. So anything you can do to just make that slow down, even a millisecond, even half a beat, is a positive. So I think you'll see some disguised looks, some hybrid looks, anything that just perhaps makes him hold it. Obviously they're without Von Miller. I think they can still rush the quarterback. Obviously Miller is an all-timer, but I still think they can rush the quarterback to some degree without Von.
We got word this week, Matt Milano is questionable for the game. He hasn't practiced much, is dealing with an injury. Last time these two teams played, Tre'Davious White wasn't on the field, Jordan Poyer wasn't on the field, and of course Milano was not on the field in that game either.
And Rousseau got dinged and only played 15 snaps.
Right, and Rousseau was off the field. So you're talking about 44 guys, 40% of your starting 11 or thereabouts that were not there. Where have you seen this Bills team evolve to from the beginning, if you can think about it, because I know you've watched 150 games of film.
Right.
From the beginning of the year, now that they've got, when he's healthy, obviously, Milano, Tre'Davious White, of course, when he's healthy, Jordan Poyer, now that he is healthy and back on the field, along with everybody except Von Miller. This is a much different team than we've seen at other points during the season, is it not?
I think every team evolves. I think, as you recall, in that first Jets game, the Jets really ran the ball effectively in that, when they got the ball late in the game, it was a 17-17 game. And I think if memory serves me correctly, the first 8 plays of that drive were runs by Robinson and Carter. So, it was an odd kind of game. It wasn't as if, and like I said, it was Wilson, not White, but it wasn't as if the pass game was killing the Bills. I think everybody was surprised, Brownie. Wouldn't you agree? When on that final drive, when they ran the ball 8 consecutive times, and I think they gained over 70 yards on those 8 runs.
It was a poor tackling game. I remember Leslie Frazier talking about it being a poor tackling game. And Poyer, White, Milano, those are probably 3 of your more sure tacklers. So having them on the field, hopefully if Milano can go.
And by the way, Bernard was the player who played for Milano, and I don't think he would be the player who would play this week, quite honestly, if Milano can't go. It would be A.J. Klein.
Yeah,
and, I remember watching that tape and thinking to myself, because Bernard played almost every snap, if not every snap, thinking to myself, God, he really looks small on film. He looks like a safety. And I thought he played small. Like, I didn't think he was a factor in the run game.
Right, and you're right. We're thinking the same thing. We've discussed it. A.J. Klein would be the next guy in if Milano can't go. Another guy that's out this week is Jordan Phillips, the big defensive tackle. Now, the Bills, I think he rotates in, so it's hard to say what kind of percentage it would change things because Daquan Jones and Ed Oliver and Tim Settle have been pretty good down inside themselves. But with an extra big body like like Jordan Phillips rotating in and not there this week, it might be difficult to see a substantive change in the run defense they've been able to put out there in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Steve. I mean, look, you can go back to that last game. I just looked at my notes, and the Jets got the ball at their 4-yard line with 7:53 remaining in a 17-17 game. And I guarantee that there were a lot of Bills fans, and maybe even you guys, that thought, hey, they're at their 4-yard line. This defense will hold them. They'll get good field position, and the Bills will go on and win the game. And then they had 8 straight runs for 73 yards, 3 runs of 10-plus yards. So that really turned out to be the way that game played out. It wasn't as if the Jets just killed the Bills defense, but in that moment in the game, they could not stop the run. And I think that's where Bernard was a factor. Like you said, Steve, I think Klein would be the guy if Milano can't go.
Greg, thanks as always. We appreciate it. Enjoy the games this weekend, and we'll catch up with you next week.
All right, guys, appreciate it. Thanks.